Have the tables turned in the Ukraine conflict? With growing discontent and a surge of voices admitting defeat, Russia's reality may be unraveling before our eyes. Vice President J.D. Vance's remark, "Russians have got to wake up and accept reality," cut through the fog on September 28, highlighting the stark truth: lives are being lost, and for what? As pressures rise, not only from the West but from within Russia itself, the narrative is shifting. How has it come to this? In what was meant to be a swift military assertion, Putin's forces rolled into Ukraine in February 2022, confident that resistance would crumble. The strategy appeared straightforward: march into Kiev, and Ukraine would surrender, just as it had after the annexation of Crimea in 2014. However, the reality was starkly different. Ukraine fought back fiercely, surprising the world with their resilience and innovative strategies, especially with drone warfare. As time passed, the anticipated victories transformed into a tale of Russian miscalculations, leading to significant losses on the battlefield. Western military support began to pour in, propelling Ukraine further into the limelight as they proved to be more than a match for the Russian military powerhouse. Fast forward, nearly 4 years into this devastating conflict, and Ukraine is not just surviving but increasingly inflicting damage on Russian forces. Could it be that Russia's supposed path to victory has instead sealed its doom? The echoes of such a realization are surfacing, not just from Western analysts but from individuals within Russia. One such voice belongs to Tatiana Montyen, a pro-Kremlin commentator who usually toes the party line but recently revealed the disastrous state of affairs during a September interview. Montyen expressed the desperation felt within the ranks, noting a possible second wave of military mobilization if substantial progress was not achieved soon. Her candid acknowledgement of Russia's dwindling morale and manpower contrasts sharply with the Kremlin's facade of strength. What happened to the unwavering propaganda? Just as Montyen spoke out, Dmitry Rogozin echoed her sentiments, questioning why Russia has struggled to gain the upper hand in Ukraine. He framed their challenges as a David versus Goliath scenario, yet his excuses only hinted at a deeper truth: Russia's overwhelming hubris may have finally met its match. With heavy sanctions weighing on the military's capabilities, and drones overwhelming the battlefield, he described advancements as painfully slow and costly in Russian lives. Could this be a sign that Russian strength is faltering? Pavel Gubarev, a former pro-Russian figure, delved even deeper into the grim state of affairs. Taking to social media, he criticized the government's portrayal of achievements, admitting that things have reached a stalemate, bordering on defeat. His statements hinted at a fracture within Russian nationalistic pride and pointed to a growing resistance against misinformation. This isn't just dissent, it's the wind of change looming over Russia's political landscape. As the casual din of state-controlled media slowly shifts, could this signify a monumental shift in popular sentiment? The September 19 episode of a state talk show is telling. A guest dissected the alleged casualty figures touted by the government, arguing that such losses would imply the total collapse of the Ukrainian army, which has not occurred. When voices of reason begin to pierce the propaganda, is that a crack forming in the foundation of support for Putin? As more observers begin to question the narrative spun by the Kremlin, the potential for change grows. These underlying sentiments reveal a brewing storm of frustration. With Putin's grip seemingly loosening and the burgeoning unrest among his citizens, could this spiraling acknowledgement of failure be the beginning of the end for his regime? The tides may soon shift. After all, as the feelings of the average Russian become unveiled, how much longer can the Kremlin control the narrative? In a shocking twist, prominent Russian voices have begun to echo an alarming truth: the war in Ukraine is not favored for Russia. One such voice, Tatiana Montyen, widely known for her allegiance to the Kremlin, recently stirred waves of disbelief with her bold assertions. She has spent years reciting state propaganda, but during her September 22 interview, she unveiled a grim reality. The situation has deteriorated so much that drastic measures will soon be necessary, she warned. With a shift in tone, Montyen recounted how the Russian offensive has slowed significantly, stating, "They may have exhausted their last reserves." Such candor from a figure once considered a loyal supporter marks a seismic change in the narrative. Montyen's revelations contradict the optimistic facade usually projected by Putin's regime, and she's not alone. A day earlier, Dmitry Rogozin, also aligned with the Kremlin and a powerful senator in the occupied regions, conveyed a similar sentiment. He faced the brutal question head-on: why is Russia failing to secure victory in Ukraine? His response was riddled with excuses, almost reminiscent of a child trying to explain away a lost game. He lamented, "On our side, it's just us, the Army and the Navy, our two allies. The Navy isn't much involved at this point." It was a feeble dismissal of the heavy toll the war is exacting on Russia. But let's ponder this for a moment. What does it reveal when the Kremlin's own champions start to voice doubts? Can the once unshakable narrative of triumph be crumbling, and what might that mean for a nation unaccustomed to admitting defeat? In the shadows of battle, even the staunchest supporters of Putin are beginning to question the truth. As internal sentiments shift, Russia faces a tumultuous reckoning. Will the tide of public opinion turn against a regime once seen as invincible? The harsh realities of war are now seeping through the cracks of propaganda, laying bare the cost of ambition. The haunting specter of despair looms, whispering that a new chapter in Russia's story is about to unfold, one marked not by glory, but by a sobering truth. In a shocking revelation from Russian commentators, the facade of a victorious Russia in Ukraine is crumbling. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's recent statement resonated loudly, claiming that Russians are slowly waking up to the truth, that their nation is embroiled in a losing endeavor. As the echoes of despair grow louder, it's evident that the propaganda surrounding the conflict is beginning to fray at the edges. Vance's assertion that a lot of people are dying and they don't have a lot to show for it is no simple critique. It comes as a slap in the face to Vladimir Putin, especially as voices from inside Russia itself join the chorus of dissent. Take Tatiana Montyen, a pro-Kremlin figure who recently admitted that Russia's military is on the brink of devastation. If there's no major breakthrough in this spring-autumn campaign, she proclaimed, we may need a second round of mobilization. The implication is clear: Russia's military strategy is faltering, and the anticipated victories are nowhere in sight. Dmitry Rogozin, another significant pro-Putin voice, corroborates this sentiment. During an interview, he lamented about the overwhelming technological advantages Ukraine holds, claiming that they possess 10 times more drones than Russia. The battlefield, once thought to be dominated by Russian forces, is now proving treacherous. But what does this mean for the average Russian, whose friends and family are now trapped in a quagmire of war? The price of progress on the battlefield, what Rogozin calls a colossal price, is paid in blood. Could the growing disillusionment lead to an uprising against the very regime that has led them to this ruin? Pavel Gubarev, a former pro-Russian leader from occupied Donetsk, worries that Russia's losses are insurmountable. He argues that while Russia attacks, Ukraine defends, leading to devastating consequences for Russian forces. The stakes have intensified as Ukrainian strikes have reportedly destroyed 26% of Russia's refining capacity, deeply impacting its military operations. As the war drags on, more Russians are starting to realize that behind the Kremlin's curtain, victory is slipping further away. This isn't just a battle for territory, it's a war that questions the very foundations of Putin's regime. How long can this charade continue before the reality bursts through the veneer of power? The tension is palpable. Can Putin withstand the brewing storm of dissent? As the clock ticks, every moment could tip the scales toward change or disaster. What will become of a nation caught between loyalty and reality? Amid the horrors of war, whispers of desperation are beginning to echo from within Russia itself. With an alarming clarity, Tatiana Montyen, a pro-Kremlin voice, has unveiled the stark reality that Russia is facing significant losses. The battlefield, once perceived as an easy conquest, has become a graveyard for hope, and most critically, for countless soldiers. Montyen claimed, if there's no major breakthrough in this spring-autumn campaign, a second round of mobilization is on the horizon. How shocking that the very voices once chanting for victory now speak of defeat. Recently, a chilling revelation emerged: over 26% of Russia's oil refinery capacity has been decimated due to Ukrainian strikes. These relentless assaults aren't merely disrupting production, they're crippling the very essence of Russia's war efforts. The haunting smell of smoke hangs over the battlefield as devastation ripples through the heart of the Russian military machine. But there's more to the story. Pavel Gubarev, a former pro-Russian leader, dropped another bombshell: Russian propaganda misleads the public into believing victory is close. He articulated what many dare not say: in fact, our situation constitutes defeat. Could the tide be shifting? Gubarev's audacious statement echoes through the corridors of power. One must ponder this: are the lies spun by the Kremlin finally unraveling? With a tone of disbelief, he suggested that Russia's governing structure is outdated. There is no possibility of victory while Russia's colonial system remains intact. Was this a subtle call for change? Perhaps even a revolution? As the grim realities of war extend beyond the front lines, a wave of anger is surging within the Russian populace. No longer are they content with state-controlled narratives, especially as the death toll rises towards the heavens. The anger is palpable. Russians are awakening, piecing together the truths hidden from them for so long. State-controlled channels, normally bastions of propaganda, have started to broadcast dissenting voices. On an episode of a live political talk show named Meeting Place, the absurd exaggerations of Ukrainian losses were dissected openly. How could Ukraine lose 1.7 million people? One guest exclaimed, questioning the very framework of the Kremlin's claims. The voices of the ordinary people, dissenters of the regime, are breaking through. But what does this mean for Putin? As the narrative shifts from blind allegiance to cautious skepticism, the impact on Putin's perceived invincibility is becoming evident. The undertow of public sentiment grows stronger every day. Are the rumbles of discontent strong enough to challenge the iron grip of state propaganda? Each day brings us closer to a pivotal moment in history. The walls of silence are crumbling, and the echoes of truth grow louder. The awakening of dissent in Russia. In a recent momentous broadcast, a guest on a popular political talk show vehemently dismantled the Kremlin's narrative regarding Ukrainian military losses. He boldly stated, when hostilities began, the Ukrainian army consisted of around 800,000 personnel, and it grew by approximately 100,000 to 120,000 every year. He pointedly questioned the official claims of 1.7 to 2 million casualties, suggesting that if true, the Ukrainian military would have long since ceased to exist. This moment serves as a striking indicator of the growing discontent among the Russian populace. What does this reveal about public sentiment in a nation suffocated by propaganda? Could it be that the tides are shifting? As he dissected the inflated casualty figures, the atmosphere in the studio became electric, and the host of the show pressed further, inquiring whether the Russian Ministry of Defense was deceiving the public. The guest's response sent shockwaves through the audience. Not only ours, he declared. He cautioned against underestimating the resolve of the Ukrainian forces. Imagine the weight of those words. A common citizen, expressing such thoughts on state-controlled television, suggests a crack in the facade of official propaganda. As the cameras rolled, the implications rippled throughout the nation. Dissent is no longer confined to whispers in the shadows, it's now venturing into the spotlight. This shift could mark a turning point in Russian society, revealing a growing frustration with years of distortion broadcast daily. As Gubarev's earlier assertions illustrated, Russia, rather than winning, is mired in a stalemate, perhaps inching inexorably toward defeat. This sentiment, shared by a chorus of critics who once rallied behind the Kremlin's banner, signals a seismic shift. The question looms: will these voices of discontent grow louder, or will they be silenced once again? The winds of change as echoes of this bold discourse reached wider audiences, they spun through the hearts of many. Could the frustration felt by a few spark a wildfire of resistance? The situation continues to become more precarious for leaders who've grown accustomed to unchallenged authority. The once monolithic narrative of victory is beginning to fracture. In a land where the scent of stale propaganda has long enveloped public discourse, cracks are forming, and light is seeping through. As discontent brews, can the Kremlin control the narrative, or will it drown in the swell of growing dissent? The stage is set for a clash that may very well change the course of history. How has a military titan succumbed to a slow, relentless defeat in a war expected to be swift? The growing acknowledgement within Russia about its faltering position in the Ukraine conflict carries great implications for its leadership. Recently, prominent voices within the government have started to echo what's been feared in whispers: the notion that Russia is losing the war. This is not a dramatic collapse, as one might expect from the losing side. Instead, it signifies a more insidious defeat, one that chips away at national pride, revealing deep fractures in both military strength and the credibility of leadership. The once unstoppable offensive, designed to penetrate Ukrainian defenses in mere days, has now stretched into a prolonged conflict lasting years, casting doubt over Russia's military efficacy. Before the dawn of summer, Russian President Vladimir Putin confidently claimed, "All of Ukraine is ours." Yet, the ground realities paint a far grimmer picture. Recent reports reveal that in the traumatic summer offensive, Russia managed to capture a mere 1,548 square kilometers, around 597 square miles. What's striking is that this pitiful gain stands in stark contrast to the mounting losses faced by Russian troops on the battlefield. The heavy toll escalates day by day, drowned in bloodshed as each moment drags them deeper into despair. Moreover, the ongoing casualties are mounting. As bodies pile up, it becomes clear, this isn't merely a war of attrition. It is evolving into a war of desperation, where the invading force, buried under international sanctions and a burgeoning Ukrainian resistance, seems unable to achieve its objectives. The persistent supply of military aid from Western allies has bolstered Ukraine's defenses, enabling them to leverage their strength with sophistication and agility, entirely altering the dynamics of ground warfare. And in a stunning turn of events, even former Kremlin supporters have begun to break ranks. Figures like Pavel Gubarev, once staunch advocates for the Russian political agenda, are now making bold declarations about the shortcomings of the military operation. The situation is a stalemate, Gubarev asserted, hinting at the looming call for a re-evaluation of strategies. He audaciously challenges narratives perpetuated by state media, which insist that royalty will soon emerge victorious against the Kiev regime. As the gap between the Kremlin's bombastic proclamations and the battlefield truths widens, the people of Russia are starting to awaken. With rumors swirling and courage bubbling to the surface, public dissent is no longer confined to the shadows. What has led this shift among the populace? What does it signify for Putin's reign? As whispers of defeat grow louder, will there be a reckoning, or will those in power continue to spin their webs of deception? As the sun set on a tumultuous summer, the numbers began to tell a story that no one wanted to hear. Reams of data from the Ukrainian mapping efforts and insights from a prominent open-source intelligence organization revealed that Russia had ambitious plans that sadly fell short. Over the course of the summer, Russian forces managed to capture merely 1,548 square kilometers, or about 597 square miles. On the surface, that sounds like a win, but it represents a minuscule 0.256% of Ukraine's vast territory. Picture it, a giant bulldozer attempting to push against a mountain, while only scratching its surface. But the grim picture doesn't end there. As the summer offensive drew to a close, the reality hit even harder. Between January 1st and August 31st of that year, Russia suffered a staggering loss of 210,000 soldiers, a figure swollen by the failed summer push. The toll in human life tells a shocking tale, 427,000 soldiers lost throughout the previous year alone. That translates to 637,000 troops buried beneath the weight of an ambition that now seems absurd. These losses stand in stark contrast to the near-invisible gains, indicating an unsustainable war of attrition initiated by Russia. The tide of public sentiment began to shift, however subtly. Unbeknownst to Vladimir Putin, the airwaves pulsed with an undercurrent of dissent. On September 30th, an issue surfaced. Russia's Ministry of Defense unveiled a map on Telegram claiming territory gains in 2025. Precision seemed to vanish, and unease crept in. What was once a tale of confidence was fast becoming a narrative of defiance. As cracks in the Kremlin's firewall of propaganda began to show. What if the very map touted as proof of victory was just a relic of the past? A map, at least 50 years old, had the city of Siversk labeled as Yama, an outdated depiction of a territory that hadn't been referred to as such since 1973. Could the Kremlin's illusion of success be hanging by a thread? In this crucible of conflict, revelations took on the power of a lightning bolt illuminating the dark, hidden corners of truth. While Russia's leaders painted a rosy picture, the stark reality echoed louder through the minds of ordinary citizens. Voices of the once steadfast propagandists turned cautious as the reality on the ground became impossible to ignore. The lies were unraveling, the stakes were too high. In this tale of power and destruction, uncertainty loomed large. The shocking reality was that the Russian regime's grand illusion of victory may be crashing down, revealing the cold, hard truth: Russia is losing the very war it started. The very fabric of propaganda that once held sway is now fraying, with dissent bubbling beneath the surface. The questions remain: what will happen when the facade finally crumbles? How long can misinformation hold back the tide of reality? This is a narrative that continues to evolve as truth and lies collide in an ongoing saga. The tale begins with a seemingly innocuous map. Russia's Ministry of Defense shared it on their Telegram channel, proudly claiming it illustrated territorial gains since early 2025. At first glance, the map appeared standard. However, sharp observers quickly uncovered a startling truth: this map was a relic, dating back at least 50 years. Among its many discrepancies, the city formerly known as Yama, now recognized as Siversk, pointed to a significant issue. Siversk's name hadn't been Yama since 1973. The map was riddled with outdated labels. Bakhmut, for instance, was still displayed as such, despite the fact that Russia oscillates between calling it its original name or an entirely different one. Such inconsistencies raised eyebrows. Why use an archaic map? Was it an attempt to inflate territorial claims by relying on old city boundaries? Did the Kremlin genuinely misjudge its encroachments, blissfully unaware of shrinking ground? The repercussions of this blunder were severe, as it severely damaged Russia's credibility. Strikingly, this misstep didn't merely showcase negligence, it painted a grim picture of desperation. Reports suggested that Russia might need to initiate another mobilization. The ground realities were weighing down on them. Tatiana Montyen, a known pro-Kremlin commentator, hinted that the last of their military reserves could be dwindling. If that were true, it meant Putin would face significant unrest as the population revealed its war weariness. The aftermath of the map's release was visceral. Discontent simmered in the undercurrents of Russian society. Frustration echoed in hallways and homes as the specter of more mobilization loomed. Soldiers recalled from their posts voiced grievances about inadequate training and unfulfilled payments. Sounds of disillusionment and distrust permeated the air, marking this moment as pivotal. What would happen if the reality of the battlefield finally dawned on the Russian populace? Could the winds of change lead to a shedding of blind loyalty? The precarious nature of their situation, coupled with the stream of revelations, started painting a stark narrative of potential upheaval. As the ancient map continued to unravel the facade of success, how might Russia's next move resonate with its citizens? Histories are often rewritten, but this time, with the stakes at their highest, the narrative may not align with those in power. The futility of past successes began echoing louder. Could this finally signify a broken alliance between the Kremlin and its people? With every disclosure, tension mounted, pressing for clarity in murky waters as the struggle for the truth danced on the edges of chaos. When the tensions between Russia and Ukraine escalated, expectations ran high. Vladimir Putin believed sweeping triumph was imminent. But as the months rolled on, the ground truth began to unravel. Shocking admissions from within Russia have shaken the very foundations of the Kremlin. Wake up, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance pressed in a September statement, revealing a hard reality: countless lives have been lost, and for what? This stark reminder strikes a nerve. As the war drags on, nearly 4 years since the invasion began, imperative questions arise. Is Putin oblivious to the growing unrest among his own ranks? Voices once loyal to the Kremlin, such as Tatiana Montyen and Dmitry Rogozin, have begun rebelling against the party line. These voices, long accustomed to singing praises for Putin, now paint a bleak picture of defeat. Montyen hinted at a crumbling military, suggesting mobilization may be imminent, should the situation not improve. They may have committed their last reserves, she declared, leaving an unnerving silence echoing in the air. Rogozin's comments echoed this sentiment, remarkably foreboding amid their militaristic bravado. Boasting about Russia's historical military capabilities now feels hollow. On our side, just us, the army and navy, he lamented, exposing a sense of vulnerability that reveals cracks in the once invincible facade. The Kremlin's control appears to slip as he acknowledged, Western sanctions weigh us down, hinting at a grim reality for troops facing insurmountable odds. Then, an unexpected twist. Pavel Gubarev, a former pro-Kremlin proxy, shocked audiences by declaring that Russian propaganda misleads the public, with an urgency that unsettles. We are grinding down the enemy, the situation is a stalemate, he warned. The truth is weaponized, and Gubarev's stark words carry an undeniable weight, suggesting the very foundations of Putin's power might be at stake. But what fuels this pregnant discontent? Reports from state-controlled media reveal cracks even in their narratives. Visits to political talk shows uncover a brave dissent rejecting Kremlin-imposed realities, causing shockwaves among the Russian public. As state channels air skepticism, it raises the stakes. Could this be the fracture that leads to an unraveling regime? Explicit references to Russia's military losses, alongside a profound acknowledgement of the suffering endured, resonate through every household. The prospect of another mobilization looms, a sign of desperation rather than strength. The air thickens with uncertainty, and the sounds of discontent grow louder with every passing day. As we stand at this pivotal moment, the bubbling anger amongst citizens threatens to destabilize what Putin has so carefully constructed. Each revelation becomes a new thread in the tapestry of dissent. Against this backdrop, voices of frustration echo louder than ever, challenging the narrative and perhaps foreshadowing a reckoning for a leader who refused to acknowledge the decay we now witness. Could it be that the very fabric of Putin's support is starting to fray? As calls for change rise from the most unexpected places, the question arises, will this be the moment the tide turns? Or will the Kremlin crush these dissenting voices once and for all? Only time will tell, but the reality hanging in the air suggests that a storm is brewing. In the coming chapters, we explore a crucial moment that reveals the internal struggles of Russia regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Many believe that President Putin himself is beginning to acknowledge the inevitable outcome of this war. U.S. official Keith Kellogg recently asserted that inside the Kremlin, a sense of defeat is palpable. Kellogg, speaking at the Warsaw Security Forum, stated, "Deep down, Putin, realizes he's not going to win. It's a losing fight for him in the long term. It's not going to happen." Ukraine, using strategic strikes on Russian oil refineries, has pushed this point home. With each attack, Russia's ability to fuel its military and sustain its citizens dwindles. Anything that deprives Russia of oil dollars is a good move, Kellogg emphasized. This insight aligns with a growing sentiment among Russians, acknowledging that the war in Ukraine has become unwinnable. In the wake of suffering substantial losses, chaos looms on the horizon for Putin. The grim reality remains, thousands of Russian soldiers continue to perish while the conflict spirals further out of control. As public dissatisfaction grows, the risk of unrest rises. Putin stands on shaky ground, fully aware that the tide may soon turn against him. Can he regain control, or is he on the edge of a political disaster, as he confronts the consequences of a misguided conflict? Tune in to see how this unfolding drama could change the landscape in Russia forever.